Hello everyone, welcome. I'm very excited for this video because we're going to be doing a 5-star audit. We're going to be looking at every book that I have ever given 5 stars. We're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive, trying to figure out what makes me love a book so that we can then read things in the future in a part 2 that we think are going to be 5 stars. So welcome, grab a cup of tea. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it. I think Meg was the one who did this first, and recently a lot of other creators have been doing this type of video and I've been just loving watching all of them, so I thought I would make one for myself. I'm trying to be really intentional this year about what I purchase, what's on my TBR, what I'm reading, and I feel like right now the things that I end up purchasing and reading are things that are really popular because I forget about things if they're not right in front of my face, and so just naturally, the things that I see people talking about the most are the things that I end up picking up and reading. And I'd like to be a little bit more intentional about seeking out things that are gonna be perfect for me. So step 1 is to look at everything I've given 5 stars. So here is that graphic of every single book I have ever given 5 stars to. There are quite a few of them. There are some 4.75s on here as well because a 4.75 is basically a 5. It deserves to be here. So I actually found 13 different subcategories in here. I read across a lot of different genres of books, so it makes sense that there's so many. If you have recommendations for anything that fits these categories, please, 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 please put them in the comments. I would be so appreciative if you can help me find more books that are perfect for my tastes. And if you have very specific little categories that you would like book recommendations for, put them in the comments and I will see if I can give you recommendations. Okay, so the first category is very slightly speculative. This encapsulates the magical realism genre, and also I have some books on here that are across different genres but have that very slight little touch of speculative in it that makes it absolutely incredible. Hang on, the cat's meowing at me. I'll be right back. You gonna hang out with me? Is that what this is about? Okay. Turns out she just wanted cuddles, so I think Ivy might be hanging out with us. I didn't realize I was depriving you of love, my sweet girl. If you see a tail, that's Ivy. Okay, perfect for talking about cats. The first book I have to tell you about is The Traveling Cat Chronicles. I would love any recs for talking animals. I tend to love talking animal stories, and I especially love this one. I sobbed while reading the end of this book. It's about a man who is traveling all over to try to find someone to take his cat, and it's told from the cat's perspective. Lonely Castle in the Mirror is one of my favorites, and I love just the craft of this story in general, but I loved how this speculative element of all of these children finding these glowing mirrors and going to this lonely castle in the mirror, going to this space that was speculative, but most of the conversations that we were having are about real life. It's about these children and their relationship to friendship and school and trying to figure out what to do if they don't feel like they belong anywhere, and it's very much grounded in the real world with a little sprinkling of magic on the top. And the last 2 I have for this are Watch Over Me and The Glass Hotel. These are very slightly ghost stories. In Watch Over Me, we have trauma manifested as ghosts and children working through that trauma together. I love Emily St. John Mandel's writing as a whole, and I really enjoyed the little ghosty elements of this. That's very slightly speculative. Next up, we have Heaven, Hell, Demons. Stories about heaven and hell have always been my favorites. I read Dante's Inferno in high school for absolutely no reason. It was not assigned to me. I chose to read this and do like essays and reports on it. I made like an art piece in one of my art classes about it. I don't know, man. High school was a rough time for me. My all-time favorite book is Paradise Lost. This is a beautiful, really early edition that my brother got me for Christmas a couple of years ago. And it's gorgeous. If you don't have an English degree, you probably haven't read this. I took an entire class on John Milton, the author of Paradise Lost, and we pretty much only studied Paradise Lost. And it was incredible, and I still want to write essays about this. There's just so many quotes in here and phrases that we use in day-to-day life that a lot of us don't know actually came from this little piece of literature, and I just love it so much, and I will stop nerding out about really niche books, but this is where my love of this super specific thing comes from, is these 2 beautiful things. Which is why when I heard about Sign Here, which is literally set in hell, and our main character is trying to make deals with people so people sell their souls, I immediately picked it up. because I knew it was gonna be a win, and it 100% was. I just love these types of stories. Small Miracles is a similar trope. We have an angel and a demon that we are following. I love stories like that. I also love stories that are just focused on like demon type creatures. I think my favorite one is Slewfoot. I really love the creature, the demon that we follow in this story, and the way that that creature grapples with what he is and has this amnesia, and it's just a really interesting look at a puritanical witch story that I feel like has been done a lot, but this is a really fresh take on it and I really enjoyed it. Obviously I really enjoyed everything. I gave all of these things 5 stars. It's a 5-star audit. All's Well is another thing that has some demon-y type creatures, some deals with the devil going on, and I love this genre. Things that I've read in this subgenre that didn't work quite as well for me include We Ride Upon Sticks. It's not a 5-star for me, but the thing that I loved the most about that book was the deal with the devil situation that was going on. Okay, let's stay on this darker trend and let's talk about horror. My 2 favorite things in horror are things that play with the fabric of reality and straight up haunted house uncanny stories. My love of the horror genre comes from The Haunting of Hill House. I love Shirley Jackson as an author in general, and I really want to reread this soon. This is just the perfect haunting house story. This has been adapted so many times, some more successfully than others. I wrote an entire 14-page paper on the success of different Haunting of Hill House adaptations. The non-Euclidean geometry of Hill House, I couldn't get out of my head, and I've just been seeking out things that play with the fabric of reality like this book does ever since I read it. Things like House of Leaves, which is just a labyrinth of a book and one of my favorite books of all time. The Rorschach texts is definitely informed by House of Leaves, and I really love what this author did. It's a very similar story to House of Leaves, but a very different take. We are being chased through the pages of the book by a conceptual thought shark. If you're a fan of Jaws, please read. This is such a fun video because I just get to talk about everything that I love in books. I recently read episode 13, which feels like a mixture of House of Leaves and The Haunting of Hill House. If these 2 books had a child, it would be this one. One of the things that I love about this book is that it also plays with the fabric of reality. I just love horror that does this. I think T. Kingfisher does this especially well in The Hollow Places. I just read the Twisted ones. It happens in there a little bit as well. This one is done even better. This was one of my top books of last year. I wanted to include And Then I Woke Up in this section because I think it does play with the fabric of reality, but it's in a very different way than all of the rest of these did. This one is very physical reality. This is horror that talks about your perception. It's more internal. It's not like there's extra space or there's a hallway where there shouldn't be a hallway. There's a door where there shouldn't be a door. This is more your mind is saying things that aren't true and how that messes with your perception of reality. Super short, packs a big punch. Then stories about the uncanny. Obviously, I have to talk about Haunting of Hill House in this. T. Kingfisher does the uncanny so well, especially in The Hollow Places. House of Leaves obviously is a haunting house story as well. So is episode 13, a lot of the things that I have already talked about. But I do also want to mention in here Thistlefoot. This was in the Goodreads Choice Awards for fantasy. It's pretty dark. I would say this is definitely leaning into the horror genre. I love this book's unique take on haunting and events as ghosts, and the way that that was played out in here really pulled me into the story because I love stories that talk about haunting and uncanny. The next section I have is cozy fantasy. I have way too many 5-star books in this category to list them all for you. If you want cozy fantasy recommendations, I have over 30 books and series that I recommend in this gigantic video. Please go check that out if you're looking for cozy fantasy recs. There's a lot more books in there, but my favorites are Legends and Lattes, anything that T. Kingfisher writes, I love. This series by Rebecca Thorne, Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, and A Pirate's Life for Tea, which I am currently reading. And of course, Becky Chambers writes incredible cozy sci-fi, and I love The Monk and the Robot duology. You'll see this on my top 10 books of the year for 2023. My next category is unhinged books. Mona Awad does this extremely well with things like All's Well and Bunny, which I've currently loaned to a friend, so I don't have a physical copy, but here she is. Another author I love for this is Samantha Downing, For Your Own Good and My Lovely Wife. We're following characters who are doing bad things. Everyone's a little bit unhinged. We don't know who to root for. We don't know what anyone's gonna be doing. I love stories like this, except I can't do stalking stories. Like, you Not good for my mental health. Can't do that. John Mars, The One, and The Passengers. Everyone has a secret. Everyone's a little bit unhinged. I love those types of stories. I would say my love for this genre kind of grew out of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, another amazing book by Shirley Jackson. Just the way that the girls in this story try to take back power is incredible. Women Eating has a little bit of this vibe, and I know A Certain Hunger is like this to a T, so that's definitely on my TBR. I like all unhinged stories, but bonus points for unhinged women. Next up is all of the books that I love that have to do with non-human characters, and we're focusing primarily on what it is to be human. My love for this genre, again, we have Paradise Lost to thank, but primarily we have Frankenstein. If you haven't read Frankenstein, I highly encourage you to do so. It's, in my opinion, a really accessible classic. It's science fiction, it's gothic, it's beautiful, and it's a very different Frankenstein to the one that you see in film and TV. Obviously, I love Prometheus type stories where we're asking, just because we can do something, does that mean that we should? But for this section, I want to talk about using non-human characters to talk about what it is to be human, because I think that's what this book does so well. Becky Chambers is another author that does this really, really well. In this book, we're on a spaceship that has an interspecies crew, and they're all trying to navigate each other's different cultures within species and across species. It's just a really interesting look. And then in here, we take that a step further. We're following an object, a robot, and we're also following an animal, a human. I won't stop gushing about this series. I just love it so much. This is like the next iteration of all of these types of stories. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Other things that I love in this genre: The Girl with All the Gifts. My favorite zombie stories are following this exact conversation. I love Frankenstein type zombie stories. It's not just a slasher, it's not just zombie gore. We are having conversations about what it means to be human while primarily exploring or sitting in the heads of non-human characters. This one doesn't quite fit in here. It does a tiny bit, but most of the stories are about human characters, but it is just so obsessed with what it is and what it means to be a human that I had to include it in this list. It was my favorite book of last year. I wanted to talk about it. Project Hail Mary does this in a really fantastic way, as does the Murderbot series. This is the full-length novel. There are also 6 novellas in this series, and they all are just incredible. I think book 2 and this one, which I think is book 5, are my favorites. And of course, Women Eating comes back because this is a vampire story. This is very much a Frankenstein story. This is very much just like Murderbot is grappling with kind of the two halves of itself, the human and the bot construct. Our main character in here is grappling with her humanness and also her vampiricness. She's grappling with both those sides of herself. And my memory card is full, so I will see you in a second. We're back with a fresh memory card and a gigantic stack of books for the animal companion category. I love an animal companion more than anything. Bonus points if it's a large dog. Enter Elatsue. Our main character can talk to the ghosts of dead animals, and her family dog that has died, Kirby, is now her ghost dog companion. Incredible. How about a manga about a man adopting a cat? If you own a cat, this man has never owned a cat before and he does not know what he's doing, but he has so much love in his heart. I sobbed reading this because he just wanted to do what was best for the cat, and he's grieving and the cat is helping him with his grief, and it's just beautiful. Obviously, I have to talk about the Tea Dragon Society graphic novel series. These are stunning, and we make tea out of magical dragons. What's not to love? Things I have already talked about. Legends and Lattes has a mouse baker who's very adorable. The Saint of Steel series has a couple of different animal companions. T. Kingfisher does a lot with animal companions, okay? The Twisted Ones has a really great dog animal companion. Swordheart has an animal companion. Most of her stuff has animal companions. Thistlefoot has a little New Orleans street cat in it who looks exactly like my little New Orleans street cat. That's a huge part about what made this 5 stars for me. I feel like this book is an amalgamation of a lot of my favorite 5-star things, which is why it keeps popping up in all of these sections. This book has a griffin. The second one has a baby griffin, which is even cuter. I'm a sucker for a black cat in a book. Again, We've Always Lived in the Castle has a black cat named Jonas. Tried to name my mother's cat Jonas after that book. She named him Shadow instead, which is a very basic black cat name. And the Traveling Cat Chronicles, of course. A book that I don't have physically is The Girl Who Drank the Moon, the animal companion dragon. Exceptional. Next up, we have fantasy that I learn from. This is like a very niche part of my fantasy reading, but I just eat this up. I love retellings in fantasy. I also love fantasy that makes me think and learn things. My love for this genre is all thanks to R.F. Kuang with The Poppy War. The war scenes in here are all that more horrific because they are based on reality. I love R.F. Kuang's books because they are so well written, and I always feel like I've learned something after I read them. So of course I picked up Babel on release day, and it's exceptional. I love how her books are action-packed dark fantasy, and it's also teaching you about atrocities that have happened in the real world. Kaikei is probably my favorite retelling I have ever read. I love this book so much. I want more people to pick it up. If you have been thinking about picking this up, now is your sign. It's time. Pick it up. The audiobook is fantastic. The print version is fantastic. I want you to read this book. Just recently, I read The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I love fantasy that teaches me about new religions and different parts of the world. The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi did that, as did Thistlefoot, a book that I've talked about multiple times. Have I even explained the synopsis of this to you? I don't think so. Let's do that now. This is the story of two siblings who inherit a house on chicken legs. It's a Baba Yaga retelling, and it is so freaking good. Very dark, but very good. And this is about a pirate in her 40s who's coming out of retirement. Did I tell you about Kaikei? I don't think I did. It's a Ramayana retelling. It is so good. I think this encapsulates what some of my favorite retellings are, is they are retellings for a purpose. They are retellings either to correct things that have been mistold because of bigotry, or we're getting a villain's backstory, and that's kind of what this book is. Our author, Vaishnavi Patel, wanted to explore what Kaikei's motivations would have been, because she did something, I'm not going to spoil it if you aren't familiar with the story. She made a choice that could be very difficult to understand. Vaishnavi Patel wanted to explore why she may have made that choice and kind of see, with the assumption that people act rationally, understand why she would have made that decision. And it's so good. Lots to say about motherhood, lots to say about growing up. We're basically following Kaikei through her entire life, and I just found this to be one of the most compelling things I read last year. Okay, 4 left. Next up is Queer Joy. I tend to read a lot of romance as audiobooks, so I don't have a ton of it physically, but I do have a couple of things. Of course, Heartstopper is a beautiful gay graphic novel series. It's 2 boys who meet in school and fall in love, and it's beautiful. Casey McQuiston is one of my favorite authors for this. I absolutely loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, as well as One Last Stop. They are both queer love stories, and I just think queer romance just really makes my heart happy. The Black Flamingo is about a boy who goes to college in London. He's making friends, he's trying drag for the first time, and his drag persona is the Black Flamingo, and it's beautiful. I also really loved Kiss Her Once for Me. That was a holiday romance. I think the author has written more queer romance. I would love to pick that up as well. I think I'm really going to be in the mood for romance this spring, and I would love for my reading to be inclusive across all different types of relationships. So if you have recs, I want to hear them in the comments. Thank you. Next is books about language or writing. Obviously, authors love writing and books, and readers love writing and books, so it's pretty common to see this, but I really love books that take this a step further, like Babel obviously is very concerned with translation and language. Vita Nostra is as well, especially with the different parts of speech. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich is a really interesting look at different types of sentences. We're talking about prison sentences, we're talking about books, we're talking about haunted books, we're talking about language as a whole. I really love all of the little intersections of language that are happening in this book. House of Leaves is definitely concerned with language, but Raw Shark Texts I think is even more, especially because our shark is kind of made out of thoughts and words. And Then I Woke Up has a lot of things to say about propaganda and the power of words. Bunny is the intersection of Unhinged and obsession with art and writing. Things like Women Eating and All's Well do that a little bit as well, but more on the art side and less on the writing side, which I also do enjoy as well. I really love the conversations in Project Hail Mary about language as well. And I especially loved how 7 Days in June was about 2 writers, and especially because we're talking about a man who writes literary fiction that's really dark and a woman who writes really smutty romance. I loved the way that we were having conversations about the worth of language and writing and what books are more valuable, and kind of breaking down these stereotypes and bigotry about different genres of books. Okay, my battery's gonna die, so we have to go fast. Next is books that intersect dark and funny. T. Kingfisher is the person who writes this the best. Her horror and her romance are dark and funny, and I love the juxtaposition of those two things. Murderbot also does this really, really well, as do people like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. My final category is a little bit rogue. It's nonfiction written by women. I love nonfiction written by men too, but nonfiction, especially memoirs written by women, just hit different. My favorite memoir of all time, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is incredible. If you can read this, please check content warnings before you do, but if you can, I highly recommend it. Rat Girl is an incredibly underhyped memoir. If you like Daisy Jones and the Six, you're gonna like this even more. It's a true story. Kristen Hirsch is the lead singer of Throwing Muses, and her memoir is just beautiful, especially if you are like around the 18 age. This primarily follows her while she's in that age. It's just a really beautiful coming of age story. I also love books like Eloquent Rage and Sister Outsider. The Care Manifesto is one of my favorite pieces of nonfiction. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy is also an incredible memoir. Biased is one of my favorite nonfictions of all time. It is just written so well, and the audiobook is exceptional. Invisible Women talks about data and statistics and how we're not including women in data and why that's a really big problem. Brotopia talks about breaking up the boys club of Silicon Valley, and that is exceptional. How to Not Die Alone and The Defining Decade are like the self-help books that you need to read if you're in your 20s. At least they worked really well for me as a person who hates self-help books. All right, folks, I'm pretty sure I've edged closer and closer and closer to the camera throughout this video, and for that I apologize. There are currently very many books where I used to be sitting, so I cannot sit there anymore. I am surrounded by the aftermath of just all of my favorite books all around me. It's a good problem to have. It's been a very positive video, and for that I am thankful. Please let me know in the comments what your favorite books are, if you can see little trends and specific categories that are coming up over and over again for you in your favorite books. I would love to find you some new favorite books in your favorite hyper-specific things that you're looking for. I would, of course, also love to hear your recommendations for anything that fits in these categories. Again, this is everything that I have given 5 stars. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of these different things, so we'll definitely be reassessing this over the years. But I want to mention something, because a lot of people, when they do this video, they talk about things that are on their TBR or things that they want to read that fit in all these categories. I am not doing that in this video, because I'm going to be making a second video where I actually create a TBR from some of these different categories, and then we can chat about whether or not the things that I thought were going to be 5 stars actually became 5 stars, and kind of chat about whether or not this is a better way for me to choose my reads than what I have been doing previously. Thank you for joining me. I was very happy to gush about all of my favorite things in books. This was a very fun video to make. Actually, you got to see a lot of my favorite books in this video, so if our reading tastes align, if you liked a lot of the things that you were seeing today and you're not already subscribed, I would love to have you join our little community and we can find new favorite books together. I post every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, so I will see you next week. Bye!